I want to start, first of all, by commending the whistleblower, Shane Kerr, for coming forward. I want to commend Primetime Investigates for airing the programme and for bringing what has been very distressing information into the public domain and making us aware of a practice that has truly scandalised and horrified the family members of children with autism and special needs. And when I watched the programme last week, I have to say I wasn't surprised, but I was sickened. And I wasn't surprised because it has to be said here today that the engagement between this state and the parents of children with special needs has for far too often been too adversarial, and that has to stop. It is completely unacceptable because the state refuses to provide the services that children with special needs need, that their families have to take the state to court and involve themselves in litigation to get their children the services that they need. And that adversarial approach simply has to stop. And even in the response that we saw from the department itself, in my view, is adversarial. You cannot hide behind legal issues here. We will debate whether or not any of this was legal, and that's a matter for legal experts. But there are moral issues, there are ethical issues, there are trust issues, and there are also issues in relation to patient and doctor confidentiality that, in my view, need to be seriously addressed. The trust issue is hugely important because if trust is breached here, then families of children with special needs will find it very difficult to send their child for therapy. They will find it very difficult to send their child for psychiatric evaluations. They will see it as very difficult to send their child for a psychological assessment if they feel that the results of those examinations end up on some database somewhere in the Department of Health for many people to see. And some of the graphic information that was held is absolutely outrageous. There can be no justification for it. Absolutely no justification whatsoever. So there are ethical issues here. There are cultural issues in relation to how the department and the state engages with very vulnerable citizens. Because again, what we're seeing here is a drip feed of information, like we saw with cervical check, like we saw with the tracker mortgage scandal, and now we're seeing it here again. Please, for the love of God, can we at once and for all see full open disclosure here? And I have to say to you, Minister, at this point in time, family members have not been notified of whatever files that the department has on them. And we had the Taoiseach yesterday disputing whether or not they were dossiers, whatever you want to call them. Database, spreadsheets, dossiers, there's information being held on those families that those families are not aware of. And those families need to be made aware of it. And the state needs to do it now, not hiding behind any review. We need full open disclosure now. And those families need supports. So let's not push back against them here, Minister. Let's make sure that there is phone lines, there is arrangements put in place that if they have any request at all, that they get the information, that there is no legal or any other pushback against them. In typical litigation circumstances, there is disclosure. All the cards are on the table. All the cards were not on the table in this case. Cards were under the table and were being pulled out of the sleeves of the Department of Health by keeping secret dossiers on their children and on very sensitive information in relation to family relationships. It's appalling. So, Minister, this practice needs to stop. You need to make sure it stops. There needs to be full open disclosure. We need to know that all families will be supported. We need to know, is it the case there's 400 families involved here? What is the number? And can that be confirmed? And will all of those families be notified? And finally, is it the case that senior counsel was not given legal advice that had been furnished to the department after a medically qualified person had raised concerns in relation to patient confidentiality? So I'm saying this to you very directly, Minister. There has to be rights that need to be put in place very, very quickly. There has to be full open disclosure. There has to be proper engagement with those families. But please stop this pushing back against children and their families with special needs who are looking for supports. And if the state spent a fraction of their time actually putting the supports in place, rather than acting against the interests of the children and the families with special needs, then we'd all be in a much better place. And in fact, we wouldn't be here today having the discussion and the debate that we are having.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle, and thanks to the deputies for the questions that they posed to me. And I think really, Deputy Cullinane, you talk about the moral, the trust, the ethical, the cultural issues. I think that's a whole conversation piece that needs to be had and needs to be put out into the open. I don't deny that one bit whatsoever. And the word I bring back is transparency. I think that's what everybody would be looking for, is a transparency conversation on it. You are right. I am sympathetic to Deputy O'Leary. I am very sympathetic. I have a clear knowledge of this. And yes, there's an opportunity to reset a lot of how things have gone on. But there's also another opportunity to have more meaningful conversations about actually how we progress disability, how disability is front and centre, that parents shouldn't feel that they have to find themselves in litigation positions in order to access their rights. It needs to be a rights-based approach going forward.
Thank you,
that's
Minister.
what I want to do.